This is LS, and you're on Thorin's YouTube channel, so cut the Western shit.
Over the weekend, G2's now AD carry, Perkz, obviously formerly their star mid laner, won many championships, 4 LCS championships with him as the star mid laner, made a tweet, which I'll put on the screen now, where he said, "Happy to announce I will be the starting mid laner for G2 Esports LEC team next week." Now, apparently, this was actually just a meme from his stream where he said something like, if Caps dies in this game, I'll be the mid laner instead of him, or if Caps dies in the LCS game, I'll be the mid laner instead of LEC game, something along those lines. So it was just a joke, but just suggesting that possibility does make you think, yeah, that is actually something which, while it's very unlikely you'd employ as any kind of a regular strategy, it's not impossible. I mean, compared to a team that has strict players who have only played their roles for their entire career, it's something to consider. So while this video is not made suggesting that they do it or predicting they will, as a hypothetical, as something to think about, I thought it was worth actually considering, because people will get the idea that obviously Perkz potentially could do that side of the swap, right? But no, stop for a second. Let's imagine that in one particular game, a specific particular game that they've fought in advance for, Perkz and Caps decide to swap where they are. Perkz goes back to mid lane, Caps goes to AD carry. Now, in terms of Perkz, as I alluded to, since he just came from mid lane, I'm pretty sure we'd all agree, especially early on before the role has changed much, he would very likely be an extremely good player still, among the best in Europe, among the best in the West. I imagine he still plays it a bit as his now off role in solo queue. Presumably, he could do that somewhat reasonably. His side of the equation wouldn't be the problem, right? What you're thinking is, right, but Caps playing AD carry, I mean, it's amazing that Perkz has pulled it off so far. No one knows how this will work out long term for him, right? Here's there the hypothetical side comes in. Okay, admittedly, he has played them very rarely, but obviously we know Caps famously played that game of Vayne last year. He's played Kaiser in the past. He's also, if you go back far enough, played occasional or odd other champions that have been AD carries at times. Admittedly, not a lot, so I will say the history isn't really there. But with his skill set, Caps is an incredibly skilled player with his own self-described sort of predilection for doing crazy things and wacky moves and taking on new challenges. You could see a world in which he might want to do this, or he might think, for one game I could do it with a specific champion or into a specific matchup that we see in the draft, and I know Perkz could go do the mid lane, so there's an angle on it. Also, having Mickey X, very good mechanical support player, that's going to help you survive lane, even if things sort of go a bit more dodgy, so there is that angle as well. The main aspects in which you'd use this, right, there's obviously two ways you could do it. You could either have it on a specific champion, in which case you'd be flexing the champion, which would be a clever way to fuck with the draft, because obviously they would think, oh, that champion is going into the mid lane now, and then you'd put it in the bot lane and swap them around. Or you could do it by planning specifically anywhere. Like, as long as this draft goes to plan and we can get a weird counter pick here or something, we'll do it. The latter is a lot more likely, because obviously you can set up the circumstances in which you're not going to get a terrible matchup in the bot lane, that even though this guy plays that champion, he doesn't know that specific matchup very well, or it's against a very good player who's good in that matchup. You wouldn't do it in that scenario, certainly. As a result, it wouldn't really be ever worth doing straight up, as in when the opponent knows you're going to do it. The main idea here is to throw off your opponent's preparation. He's prepared for that specific AD carry, that specific mid lane, the matchups that they have, and rotations of things based off those players. So it's going to entirely throw some of the enemy's plans out the window. You're hoping that that element of surprise makes up for the lack of everyday aptitude of your players at those set roles, and even then we're offsetting some of that by having an amazing player like Perkz, who we know can play mid, and Caps, who possibly could. I would actually say from Caps' playing style, I think he would be way too risky in AD carry. It'd be like Cody's son times 10, and he would just feed in team fights. But you know what? He's a fabulously mechanical player. If he really actually put in the practice to make something like this happen, maybe there's a world in which it could work. I mean, I'm already amazed at what Perkz has done, so fair play. People as talented as Caps, maybe it is possible, even though I do think it would take a mentality switch. In the same way as Doublelift could potentially go and play mid lane, it's just, again, he'd need a very different mentality, and I think he could potentially do it, but I don't know that I'd bet on him early on to make it happen. I will say, as we get further and further away from the beginning of the split, it gets less likely in all respects, because at that point it becomes more and more of a risk to put Perkz mid, even though it's still not that big a deal. So I would just say, I actually think this could happen, but it'll only happen if they have, like, an unbeaten record, or there's 2 games at the end of the split, and it doesn't matter, they've secured a top seed or the top seed, and it's a game that, you know, doesn't matter to the opponent, and they want to fuck around and troll a little bit. Yeah, I could see that happening. Or if they're in an exhibition game, they could do that in some sort of setting. Maybe the 2 of them get voted into All-Stars, and then they decide to swap around in a game. Yeah, I could see that happening. But as a serious aspect, it'd be cool, but there's too many uncertainties there, and I can't see a coach really signing off on this, unless, like I say, you've carved out a scenario where it's kind of a meaningless game. Like, no one really cares if you lose this one. Now, if you could actually make this work, it would obviously be a very powerful weapon to have in your arsenal. Like, just the impact on the scouting that you would have against your team. And like I said, if you did it on specifically flexing a certain champion, I know something like Ezreal historically, Lucian more recently, these sorts of champions, you could also see a world in which you could totally throw the other team's draft off and gain such an edge in the draft that it now might be worth it. They might think you went for a counter pick, or rather, they might think you went for a pick, which they then do a counter pick to, which you then do the counter pick to that, and then you send it in the mid lane already carry. Like, there's a lot of ways that you could make up for the problems here. To some degree, in terms of the flex aspect, it actually reminds me of what I've always thought was one of the most underrated aspects of the original Fnatic dynasty, the one that had SWAs and Xpeke as the key pieces in it. Because what people might forget is if you go back to the end of Season 2, coming into early Season 3, one of the coolest parts about that team was everyone was raving about Xpeke, and then when he was in the lineup, reckless. But one of the things that went very underrated is that one of the ways that SWAs on occasion could make Xpeke even more dangerous is that because SWAs famously, and even then it was more so because there was such a variety of picks, could play anything pretty much top lane. Actually, what they sometimes would do is pick a champion that would look like it's a mid lane Xpeke champion and then flex it to top lane so Xpeke could do exactly what I just explained before. Get himself a favourable pick in a scenario in the draft in which it looks like you lost that part of the draft, but SWAs could also still be amazing on it. There was even some games, I believe it was a game at IPL 5, where they actually just literally swapped and made SWAs go mid lane, I think with like Anivia or something ridiculous. I forget the exact game. And then instead it was Xpeke in the top lane. So they have done these things in the past. I think Xpeke was maybe playing Diana. There's something I actually wish could have potentially been an option in CJ, because if you remember at the end of the OGN era when they were going to have to merge the sister teams together and make a super team, the original rumour, and it was something that was considered, was Flame becoming a mid laner, since he already played so many AP champions and was carry top laner anyway, and they'd therefore be able to have Shy as the top laner. Well, obviously, the flex between top and mid presents itself at different points in history, so I could have seen a world in which, since Shy is such a good player at not being ganked and at playing his lane out fairly safely, you could have had some possible flex scenarios there to gain such an edge with a weird counter pick top for someone like Flame that you dominate so hard you wouldn't give up too much in the mid. I could have seen that working. Sadly, it's a move they never did because they never did Flame as a mid laner. If you want to give another game's example, obviously it doesn't work as much because in Dota people flex around lots more anyway, and in fact role swap entirely from team to team and within lineups even when they bring different players in to get the best out of all the players. Famously, it's happened a couple of times on Arteezy's teams. So some of the EG lineups he's been on, like where they had Arteezy and Sumail when he played in secret with Eternal Envy. These are 2 players where Arteezy and Sumail are basically both mid players in terms of how they're often used. I know I personally think of him as more of a carry player, but some of his best results have come when he was a mid. Obviously, when he had Faye as his carry, likewise the same for Sumail, so they could swap around depending on what was happening with Eternal Envy. I believe they actually were swapping just based on what the hero was, like if it made more sense to go to that lane or go to the other one. So these things have sort of been toyed with. In a game like Dota, it doesn't really count as much, but you can see how the mentality is similar and the edges you're trying to gain. In League of Legends, I don't necessarily know that this would work. If it ever was going to, this is a chance for it to, which is why I brought it up as a fun hypothetical in this particular video, because obviously Perks, like a motherfucker, could fulfill his end of it because we know he could be a very good mid laner. I don't know about the cap side of things. Like I say, that's more playing into like his fun personality, the fact he might be up for the crazy challenge, or maybe as an off-roll, he practices a couple of picks and he finds one like a mid lane champ that he can just play down there. I could see that aspect happening. At the moment though, unlikely to happen unless it's sort of a throwaway scenario. This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Gardner Wilson, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, James Harding, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, Daniel Yordanov, Tristan Jones, and a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for upcoming content of mine? Perhaps you'd like to ask me a question for my monthly video AMA. Do you want some teasers to see who the next guests are for my talk shows, for my interviews? Maybe you'd like to take part in a monthly esports discussion with yours truly. Well, put your money where your mouth is at the Patreon link in the description box below and join the Scrilluminati today.